Show started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jim Babb, and for a few more days anyway, I'll be the Interim Vice Chancellor for Strategic Communications here at the Virginia Community College System. If you don't mind, please mute your microphone unless you're posing a question. That will help us all hear better. Thank you. And just a reminder, we are recording this session and we'll make the recording available later to reporters and other interested parties who weren't able to join us at this time. We are glad you're here to meet our new VCCS Chancellor, Dr. David Doré, who currently is President of Campuses and Executive Vice Chancellor for Student Experience and Workforce Development at Pima Community College in Tucson. Did I get that right?
Yes, you got it right.
That's a great title. Also joining us on the call is Mr. Douglas Garcia. He is the chair of our VCCS State Board. Mr. Garcia led the 18-member search committee that identified and interviewed possible candidates for the chancellor's position. The state board hired Dr. Doré, and as chancellor, he will collaborate with the state board and will become the CEO day-to-day leader of our 23 college system beginning April 1st. Before we open the call to your questions, Mr. Garcia and Dr. Doré would like to make a few brief remarks. Let's start with our chair. Mr. Garcia.
Thanks so much, Jim, and thanks everyone for joining in. It's good seeing you again, Dr. Doré. I'm just going to be brief. We're excited that the board has selected Dr. Doré, as I kind of was quoted in the press release. This is a process that we started kind of late August, early September. We had a lot of kind of seasoned candidates, and we're excited that Dr. Doré brings a wealth of experience, whether working directly with students, working with the business community, with the centers of excellence, as well as being faculty. So he brings tons of experience in different areas, and we're excited that he's going to be leading our 23 colleges beginning April 1st. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Dr. Doré.
Thank you, Douglas. And good afternoon, everyone. And really, thank you for being here. First, I just want to say how excited I am to be coming to serve the students and the families and the communities of the Commonwealth as the next chancellor of the Virginia Community Colleges. And, I was drawn to this position because of the innovation that I saw taking place here in Virginia. And as I went through the selection process, I became even more excited about coming to Virginia. And one of the reasons for this excitement is that I am inspired by the forward-thinking vision of the State Board for Community Colleges and the direction that they've set for the colleges moving forward. And I'm looking forward to working with each of the members. And I want to especially express my gratitude to Board Chair Douglas Garcia, who has been incredibly helpful and supportive as I prepare to take on this role. And I also want to thank Governor Youngkin and Secretary of Education Gadara, who I actually had the opportunity to meet with yesterday to discuss the future role of the Virginia Community Colleges within the Commonwealth. And I believe we share a common goal of ensuring that the Virginia Community College system becomes a best-in-class national leader. And then finally, I want to say that I'm really looking forward to getting out to each of the colleges as soon as possible to meet our students and the faculty and staff and administrators. These are the people who are changing lives every day through their dedication and through their work. And with that, we are more than happy to answer any questions.
I've got one. And I can see, Dr. Doré, that you're probably not in Virginia because you've got sunshine behind you. And it's a cloudy day where I sit. Can you talk about any goals or initiatives that you may have coming into the new position? And have you visited any of the campuses around the state yet?
So I have not yet visited the campuses. I'm probably most familiar with Northern Virginia Community College. So I have some experience, and I certainly have been on one of those campuses, but I have not been throughout the state at this point. In terms of kind of initial, one of the things is that I think that there's some exciting things going on in Virginia right now, but it's, in terms of initial priorities, I think really addressing the skills gap and really accelerating the work of the colleges. The skills gap is a national crisis, frankly, and certainly that's not unique to Virginia. And I think that the Virginia community colleges really will play the pivotal role in really addressing the skills gap in Virginia. And then, also I think tied to that, obviously enrollment is a concern, and I think that alignment, I think, is really an approach to really look at enrollment from all the facets.
And the governor has talked about a desire to make sure that every, I think it's high school student, comes out with a credential that would, set them up for success. What, did you talk with him about that plan and how that the community colleges may be involved in that? And if so, can you talk about what that conversation was like?
We did talk about that, and we didn't get into details because, but I do know that the governor is interested in scale and doing that at scale. And I want to say that I believe the governor is spot on. I think the more that we can build really strong partnerships with K-12 and get students into this pipeline as early as possible, I think that the goal to have every high school student have some form of post-secondary credential in a high demand industry before they graduate, I very much support that goal. And I certainly will work with the governor and with the Secretary of Education really to look at how we can implement that at scale across the state.
And can you talk about the centers of excellence that you were involved with at Pima College or at the system, and how maybe that set you apart from other candidates for the position, and a little bit more about what that role was? It looked like it was had to do with workforce development, but I'm uncertain.
Yes, and so really the centers of excellence came out of our education and facilities master plan, but what we did is really we looked at the data across our region. And what the data was showing us is that we really needed to realign the college to the key growth sectors of Southern Arizona. And so one of the things that we did, though, before we launched those centers, is we held very large and wide industry summits. And so we had all of the key players in these different sectors. We have a number of different centers of excellence that are aligned to the key growth sectors of Southern Arizona. And essentially, the industry really helped us to shape what those centers were going to look like. And that included a lot of investment in facilities to get our facilities and our labs at, state of the art. So that was one component. The other really was aligning curriculum and then building multiple on-ramps. And so what we've done at Pima through the centers of excellence is we're really blurring those lines between K-12 and the community college. And so students have those seamless pathways. They are getting industry credentials as high school students. Another piece of that is really thought leadership and really having deep partnership with industry. And our approach is that you need to have industry at the front end of the educational funnel, not at the back end, because I think nationally there's a real disconnect often between those who hire and those who teach. And so that's another core component of the centers, is this alignment with industry. And there's really three pillars. One is speed, that we realize that if we're going to be relevant, we have to move curriculum at the speed of industry. The second is really being adaptable both in terms of our physical spaces and then how we can pivot to industry needs. And then the third is convergence. And that's really the blurring the line between the workplace and the college, so that really we have that convergence of industry in really all of the things we're doing, but also convergence of disciplines, right? Disciplines are now really converging on one another and really not looking at those in silos. So that's just some of the work that I've been doing. And I'm most proud of the work that we've done with the Centers of Excellence, because I think it's really been a transformation for Pima, and our business community is thrilled at what we've been doing around the centers.
Can you give an example of a particular industry, or kind of going back to my earlier question where you mentioned skills gap and identifying that skills gap? Are there particular skills gaps that you see in Virginia?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know,
What are they? I should ask.
yeah.
Sorry.
So I think, I mean, I'll just mention several, right? You know, and I'll give some examples at Pima as well. So, you know, IT and cybersecurity, you know, in Southern Arizona, and I know that certainly is a challenge in Virginia as well, is that we simply don't have enough talent to meet the needs of cyber and IT positions. And so that's an area where we have a center of excellence at Pima focused on IT and cyber. And what we've done there is I want to share kind of an example of that convergence. And I believe we were one of the only community colleges in the nation to do this, is we partnered with an organization called the Arizona Cyber Warfare Range. And what that organization does is really bring some of the best professionals in IT and cyber, and we host that at one of our campuses. And so those professionals are on our campus interfacing with our students, interfacing with our faculty. And what we're seeing is our most significant enrollment growth at Pima is in our centers of excellence, because these are really positioned and aligned nicely to high wage, high skill jobs. I'll give another example at Pima, and I know that you have an aerospace sector as well. One of the things that we did is we have an aviation technology center, and we received funding from the state to double the capacity of that aviation center. So we put a substantial investment into increasing the facility there. Those students that are graduating from our aviation program, they're not just getting one job offer, they're getting, you know, 3 and 5 and 6 job offers. And so what we've done is we actually just had the ribbon cutting in the fall, and now we have doubled the cohorts, and we're now going to double the output of students in this really high demand and high wage sector. So those are just some of the examples. Another, of course, you know, we're partnering extensively with the healthcare sector, because we have here in Arizona, I mean, we have a massive shortage, particularly not just of nurses, but of all the health professions. And so again, how to really increase capacity of our graduates. And those are things that I'm going to be really focused on, and really looking specifically at the various sectors of Virginia, those industry sectors, and how we're aligned to the sectors, and then really looking regionally across the Commonwealth in terms of how do we leverage these 23 colleges to make sure that we're really meeting all of the workforce demands of the Commonwealth.
Thank you.
Let's turn to Sarah and Dwayne to see if you have some questions.
Well, sure. How do you feel about differential tuition?
So I think that we have elements of differential tuition at Pima Community College. Those certainly are not market, they're not market rate differential, but in terms of some programs are certainly more expensive and have higher fees, and so that's a component, I think, of what we've done is to bill for a certain kind of fee that a student may have. Now, one of the things though that's really important and that we've worked very hard at is really providing students that financial support, right? I think financial stability is one of the biggest obstacles to students completing a program. And so the ways that we can support students through whether that's through partnering with nonprofits in terms of those wraparound services, everything from daycare to transportation, those are things that we're really focused on, that I've been focused on in Pima. We just opened a early childhood center at our Desert Vista campus precisely because we realize, in our area, and it's the same, I believe in Virginia, 1 in 5 of our students is a parent. And a student can't really complete if they don't have childcare. So I guess what I'm saying is that we really need to balance all of this, ensuring that students have the necessary financial support and financial stability to complete their programs.
Well, if I still have the floor, what were some of the things you and the governor talked about? What are your
So,
liberties?
the governor was so gracious. It was an excellent conversation. The conversation began. He just wanted to know a little bit about me. He said, I don't want to talk about your resume. I just want to know who you are. So we talked a little bit about who I am. And he basically made me feel incredibly welcome. In fact, that's one thing I have to say about every single person I have dealt with has been incredibly gracious and welcoming, and which is making me all the more excited to come to Virginia. So, so we talked about a little bit about my personal background. We talked about my professional background, and then we talked about some of his priorities. And one of the things that I'm really impressed with Governor Youngkin is he is so invested in the community colleges. And he really, I think, realizes how important community colleges are to the future of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that really, I think, inspired me in the conversation. So I hope I answered your question, Dwayne.
Was that your first conversation with the governor? I'm sorry, you may have said that earlier and I didn't hear that.
Yes, that was my first conversation with the governor.
Okay.
I did have a conversation previous with Secretary Gadara. Secretary Gadara served on the hiring committee or the selection committee, and I had the opportunity to have a brief conversation with her during that time as well.
You may have heard, and I would be surprised if you aren't, but the process became a little bit, or some would say it became a little political last summer. Do you have any thoughts about that? Want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, I don't really have. I was looking at that process from the outside, and so I don't really have a whole lot of information or insight into what took place previous. And I would defer to Board Chair Garcia on that. But I will say that my experience of this process was that it has been incredibly professional, and I think it was very strategic and thoughtful. And I'm so pleased that Board Chair Garcia facilitated the meeting with the governor and with the Secretary of Education yesterday.
Was that in person or was that over Zoom?
No, that was just like we're doing now.
Say fast trip home.
But I am looking forward to meeting the governor in person. Board Chair Garcia has graciously invited me to the legislative reception coming up here in a couple of weeks, and I plan on attending in person and really look forward to meeting a number of people at that reception as well. And I'm looking forward to meeting in person with the governor then.
Yeah, and just to follow up on that, that reception will also have, I would say, the majority of our college presidents. So that'll be the first time our presidents will get to meet with the new chancellor. So we're really excited about that.
What else should we know about you?
Well, I think you should know that I'm incredibly passionate about community colleges. I've spent the bulk of my career. One of the things I started out as a high school teacher, and then I was a university professor, but I intentionally came to community colleges because I believe community colleges are the most transformative organizations in this country. And I believe that more now after having served 27 years in community colleges. I'm married. I've been with my partner for 25 years. We have a little dog named Riley, and we now live in a wonderful neighborhood close to the University of Arizona. We love walking our dogs. We know all our neighbors, and I think we're very much involved in our community. And I love being involved in the community, and I love meeting with people, and I love working in the community college sector. Oh, and I like biking. I've hiked the Grand Canyon a couple of times, and just recently did the Tour de Tucson here in Tucson. That is a bike race here in Tucson, Arizona.
What subject did you teach in high school, and how long did you teach for?
So I taught high school for 2 years, And
Okay.
I taught both of those. I taught in a private Catholic high school. So I taught a number of different subjects, as you do in private schools. But I want to tell you one story about when I was teaching high school. This was my second year of high school, and I was teaching in Oil City, Pennsylvania. And Oil City is pretty close to Pittsburgh. And what I did is I contacted the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Show, and I took my seniors down, and we spent the day on the set of the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Show. And I'll never forget and Fred Rogers spent he spent like an entire hour just with my class, and I'll never forget what he said to me, which has kind of been a kind of a North Star for me. He said that at the heart of all learning is love. And I think that's been kind of really important to me in terms of really creating a supportive, welcoming environment for students to learn. So that's a little bit about my high school background. I also was an athletic director, and I coached cross country and track when I was a high school teacher as well.
Sarah, is there anything you'd like to ask?
Yeah, if I could jump in, you touched on enrollment, which I know is just a huge question on the minds of community college leaders right now. Any thoughts on how to go about tackling upping enrollment?
Yes, Sarah, and that's an awesome question and a timely question. Again, I think that enrollment, first of all, I think retention is as important to enrollment as getting students in the door. And so I think, we've really focused a lot of work on retention and ensuring that the students who are enrolled have the support that they need. On some levels, if we can really increase our retention rates, that can really address a substantial amount of, particularly in community colleges, a substantial component of enrollment. So that's a big focus. I think the other component, and again, this is tied to our centers of excellence, is really having multiple on-ramps for students and making sure that on-ramping process is easy and seamless, particularly with our K-12 students. And that's why I think dual enrollment is so valuable, because we've got students in the pipeline already. The other component is we have tremendous opportunities with what we call the new majority of learners, right? Veterans, learning workers and working learners, parents. And so how do we really target better these working learners and learning workers who need to upskill? I think that is the future of many community colleges. And that's where we're seeing our competition. And the competition landscape is like we have never seen before. And what they're doing, I think many of our competitors, is they're really making and designing the learning format around the learner and not around the institution. And so those are some of the things that I think are really going to be important to increasing enrollment across the system.
Thank you so much. And Courtney already touched on this, but she mentioned the sort of political nature or challenges of the process. And I would be curious, Board Chair Garcia, if you have any thoughts or comment on that.
No, look, we're just excited to have David start on April 1st. We were very appreciative that Secretary Gadara was part of the process, being the search committee, and she provided valuable insights. So we're just happy that we're at this point, and we can't wait for David to start.
Thank you.
Any impressions you have from afar of the Virginia Community College system?
Yes, I do have some impressions prior to even applying for this position. And one of the things that, again, I think attracted me to Virginia is this innovation that I see here. And one of the programs that really drew my attention is the Fast Forward program, which I believe, I hope you're all familiar with, but it really is I think, a model that is a national model. And so I think that and the investment that the system and the leadership has put into the Fast Forward program, and then looking at the outcomes of that program, that really excited me. And that's one of the indicators that this is really a forward-thinking system that really understands where community colleges need to go in the future. And so I think that was one impression. The other impression was, particularly when I was doing, I did the Aspen Presidential Fellowship, and we had some folks when I was going through that fellowship from Northern Virginia Community College and from George Mason, and to look at the innovative, seamless partnerships that they developed with the transfer institutions, and some of the work around, because I think that's so important to the mission as well, is ensuring that students are transferring successfully and then successfully completing a 4-year degree as well. So those were things that I saw that Virginia was doing that was really exciting. I had the opportunity, Harvard Kennedy School had selected the most innovative colleges in the country around workforce development, and Pima was one of those schools. But another school was Northern Virginia Community College, and so I had the opportunity. Actually, about a month before I applied, I was on a panel in North Carolina with Joe Fuller, who is a Harvard at the Harvard Business School. But another panelist was the VP of Workforce from Northern Virginia Community College, and that was exciting because I was able to hear directly what they were doing there as well. So those are things that really excited me about coming to Virginia. Not to mention the fact that it is a beautiful state, and I'm looking forward to hiking and really experiencing some of the beautiful rivers here as well.
We know you'll enjoy our humidity. Let me ask
we don't have humidity in Arizona.
You got that dry heat. Let me, if you don't mind, Eric Kolinich from our Richmond Times-Dispatch, our hometown paper, sent in a question. He's busy right now, but he wanted me to ask Mr. Garcia, as the search process restarted from the spring, did it become important that the next chancellor have experience in workforce development? And did the board have to compromise any of its original priorities in that sphere?
Great, thanks. No, I mean, I think we were always looking for someone that had a strong kind of workforce development background, as well as someone that experienced, working with students, administrators. So I don't think it was more of an emphasis this time around. In terms of our original priorities, not at all. I think we were kind of steadfast in seeking someone that's going to be transformational for our 23 colleges. So.
And if I could say another thing, because I really want to talk about the primary focus of our work, and that's on our students, our learners. One of the things that's important to me, has been important to me throughout my entire career, but will certainly be important to me coming to Virginia as the chancellor, and that is, I believe that one of my primary roles is really to elevate the voice of our students and to ensure that we are listening to our students, and we're listening to a diverse group of students. And often it is more important to listen to who is not succeeding in our system, and to listen to those who are not coming into our system, and to learn why, and to really address that. So I think that's going to be a really important component. My own leadership style is to really stay very close to frontline workers as well. If you want to know if a policy at the top is working or not, the quickest way to find out is to talk to the frontline employees of our community colleges, and they'll be able to tell you pretty quickly whether this policy works or not. So I think that's important for me, is to stay really close. The other thing that I know coming into this system is the most important asset that I will have as a leader is the ability to garner trust, because essentially this organization is really a complex weave of people. that are doing the work. And I think developing a high trust culture will be my highest priority to move the system forward.
A silence fell across the room. Okay, anybody have any other questions?
Jim, so I'm looking at the Chev site right now, but I'm wondering if you have a more updated stat. Do you have a figure on the number of students currently enrolled in the community college system, undergraduates, and in workforce training programs that you could send?
Yeah, let me look that up. for
Okay.
you. I think what we have is like we have an annual head count, which kind of more accurately reflects the total numbers, because an awful lot of our students are part-time.
Right.
So
That,
I will look that up and I will send that to you.
I found something on the site. I wasn't sure. It wasn't clear.
Yeah.
It was updated. So if you could send that, that'd be great.
I'll do
Yeah,
it.
same here. If it's different from what the Chev site is showing, I would like that, because otherwise I would just rely on the Chev
Okay.
data.
All right, will do.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to listen to us and hear a little bit of at least my story.
Well, thank you for sharing, and we appreciate the time and interest for everybody who made time for this call. We will record the call, of course, and we will post the URL to the recording of the session on the news pages of our website. If that's all we have, I want to say thank you to everyone and have a
I
great.
just wanted
Oh.
one other thing I forgot
Yeah.
to mention kind of in the opening. I really did want to say, a thank you to Dr. Sharon Morrissey, who's been kind of our interim chancellor. She's definitely done a great job, while this process has kind of played out. She's been steadfast, so we're really appreciative of her leadership during this time, and I'm pretty sure she's going to play an active role during the transition. So just thanks, Dr. Morrissey.
Okay, that's great. That's good addition. If that's it, I wish everybody a great afternoon. And thank you. Casey, I'll talk to you in a couple of minutes about the recording.
If
Thanks,
I can
everybody.
squeeze in one more question.
Oh, sure. For you?
For the new chancellor, I see where you're a first generation college student. I wonder if you want to just say a few words about that.
Oh, thank you, Dwayne. Yes, and I'm actually very proud of that, and that's something that I think, particularly for community college students, I like to share that information, because so many of our community colleges students are first generation. My father didn't even graduate from high school. He actually got his GED after World War II, and so education really transformed my life. I mean, I come from a working class family. I'm a proud graduate of Head Start. And so education really, it transformed my life. And that's really why I'm in this work, because I see how transformative education is for others. And so, as I said, I'm really proud to have been a first generation college student.
Okay, thanks very much. We look forward to having you in Virginia, sir.
All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.